All right, I'd like to bring into the conversation now our national security analyst, Hal Kempfer, retired Marines intelligence officer. Hal, I saw you reacting to that last report. So many things that we could nitpick on that, but let's start with this big breaking news. The second attack in 2 days. What can you tell us about this? This happened just a few minutes ago. We actually had you on earlier today, and we had to bring you back on to dissect this latest information.
Well, earlier today, basically, we were talking about would there be a second round? Would we go back and hit again? Of course, the president said, if based on the bomb damage assessment, how much impact we had had on the first round, that we may do a second round of strikes or more. Well, this was the second round. This was hitting a what appears to have been a coastal radar. I don't know which radar site this was. It could have been. Now, there was the Houthis. Their rhetorical flourish was in full fashion, and they said that they were going to strike back with everything they had. Well, apparently, everything they had was one missile, and the missile went out in the ocean and didn't hit the target. And it turns out that the missile was actually tracking on a tanker full of Russian oil, which obviously was not the target that they were aiming for. But in that, it kind of makes you wonder, how did they track that tanker? And it could have very well been that one radar site. We could have picked up on emissions from that radar site, realized it was in action, and decided that since they're using that since they're using that area of the Gulf of Aden to target vessels, that we'd go ahead and essentially blind them in that area. Now, I don't know if we blinded them with the other radars. There's a number of coastal radars across Yemen, going up the Gulf of Aden, and of course up the through the Bab el Mandeb into the Red Sea. I don't know how many of those are still operational, but it would make sense that those would be high priority targets for us to take out, to but make it impossible for them to track ships. If you can't track a ship, it's very impossible. It's very difficult to target a ship if you don't know if it's there, and that would be the idea.
You know how we heard in that last report, John Kirby saying that they're not interested in a war with Yemen. Can we take the second strike as just retaliation for what's happening in the Red Sea? Or is this the unfortunate effect and it's going to be an escalation from here on out?
I think this is just a response. Yemen responded by firing a missile. We responded by taking out a radar site, and I think it's really what we're trying to do is degrade their ability to target ships in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aden, basically stop these anti-ship attacks. I don't necessarily. We're certainly not looking at a war with Yemen, or we're not a war with Yemen. It'd be a war with the Houthis. The Houthis do not represent Yemen. They hold a large chunk of territory in Yemen, to include Sana'a. It's a historical capital city, but they do not control all of Yemen. However, with that said, we don't want a war in that area, and we have not put anything on the ground. Right now, we're using our long range strike capability, which is my understanding. Primarily, the strikes were done by Tomahawk missiles. That was the primary means. There were airstrikes. I'm not quite sure. I know some of the. What I'm told is that some of the, maybe all of the F-18s were actually what we call designating targets. They were using lasers to designate targets for precision strikes. I don't know if they actually delivered any munitions themselves. They may have, and of course the UK was also involved with this. So I'm not quite sure what they delivered in the way of munitions from aircraft either. But with that said, we're not looking to expand this. We've made it very clear. I think we've also made it very clear, and there's some interesting. I don't know what would call reporting, but interesting writing out there by various experts that Iran may have put itself in a corner. They may have a difficult. Iran loves to go out there and do things that kind of push. They went and took that ship off of Oman yesterday, essentially piracy again, near the Sea of Strait of Hormuz, and so they're doing that. They're doing it to kind of push the envelope, but Iran does not want a war with the United States, nor do they want a war with the United States and its allies. And some of those allies could be their neighbors if there was such a war. So they want to push, but now they're looking at what's just happened in Yemen, and it's not necessarily that we're delivering a message, but you can't help but do something like that, and a message is sent. And that message is that we have some tremendous capabilities, and if we had the effect on target that the sheer array of munitions and the number of targets suggest, we may have seriously degraded the ability of the Houthis to continue to target ships in the Red Sea. However, tomorrow, the next day, this coming week, that'll be the truth teller.
You know how when I first heard about the second attack, we have also heard reports that the Houthis are saying that they are going to respond to these attacks harder, stronger, and the US and other forces, they're going to feel it. I immediately thought that the US is taking this threat seriously and they're doing as much as they can now to kind of eliminate this threat as a whole.
Well, here's the thing with the Houthis, and look, it's not unique to the Houthis. You know, when we hit, we have tremendous capabilities, and when we hit hard, the first thing they do is they will get out there with rhetorical flourish and say, "Oh, we're going to strike back harder and worse than we ever did before." And they have to say that. That's basically for their domestic audience. You may have seen they had a huge rally the day after, right after the strikes. They had this massive rally in Sanaa, and I think there were smaller rallies elsewhere in the country. And of course, you have to put this overarching rhetoric. They have to do it for domestic consumption, saying we're going to strike back with everything. The question is, what is in their kit bag of everything now? We have had a lot of time to figure out where their drones are, where their missiles are, where their munitions are. It's not that tough to figure out where their coastal radars are or any other collection means that they're using. And we hit them with what was reportedly over 100 missiles. That's a lot of ordnance at a variety of targets, and it's not quite sure what means they have left. I would imagine that certainly the stuff that was in the ready to go category was probably high on our list of things to take out. So they may be saying that they're going to hit us with everything, but they may not have much left right now to do it. Of course, the fear is that they're going to try and do something like other terrorist groups in the region and use some sort of surreptitious terrorist means to attack us directly or indirectly around the world. Now, we took them off the foreign terrorist organization list. We just heard today President Biden saying that he thinks they're a terrorist organization. I would guess with that kind of high level guidance that they're going to be doing a very quick review as to whether they need to be returned to the foreign terrorist organization list. Keep in mind, a lot of other countries still consider them terrorists, and there's a very good chance that that's actually going to happen. But if they can't strike us with missiles and drones, they're going to try and find other things. And by the way, one of the things we have to look at is maritime assets. What do they have on the water? What will they try to do? And we already saw one unmanned surface vessel. We may see something like suicide surface vessel bombings. With that, I don't think they'll have a lot of success because, frankly, if you have the weapons that we have in the water, as those boats go out, they don't seem to get very far.
Hal, I want to
So,
go back to this point that you made about Biden. He's kind of downplaying this foreign terrorist organization label to give to the Houthis. Earlier today, Andrew Kraft, when you were sitting with him for the interview, we asked you about that. But how important is it for them to have this designation?
well, for what we're doing right now, it's not essential. I mean, we had more than enough justification, more than enough reason. Not just us, but the global community had more than enough reason to attack the Houthis to stop these attacks in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. All right, that was open and shut. However, because of the type of organization they are, because of what they're doing, because of the means with which they're doing it, I think that we're going to go ahead and probably put them back on the FTO list, the Foreign Terrorist Organization list. And what that does is it allows us a little more freedom of action in addressing the Houthis as a broader organization, not just Houthi military positions inside Yemen, but also looking at the Houthis across the board. And it helps us and our allies in dealing with Houthis that may be traveling to foreign countries, could be traveling to our country to possibly, to develop some sort of terrorist attack on U.S. territory or in some other country. And by us designating them with that, it enables us to legally do things and politically do things that we may not be able to do quite so easily if they didn't have that designation.
Okay, Hal, you also mentioned earlier that the Houthis may not have so much left in them after all of these strikes against them, but they are backed by Iran. How close are we to a full scale war with Iran?
I don't think we're any closer today than we were before the strikes began.
Okay.
In fact, I would have, based on everything I'm seeing, and certainly General McKenzie kind of predicted this right before the strikes took place, that this would deter Iran. Iran wants to go up to the board, but they don't want to cross that line. They know that if they get in a full war with the U.S., that it will not go well for them. The other thing too is the current theocratic regime doesn't have a lot of domestic support. They were able to suppress through very draconian means the protests that took place last year. But with that said, they don't have a whole lot of internal support within Iran. They're directly across the water from the UAE, from Saudi Arabia. These are all countries that very have a strategic opposition to what Iran's been doing, and Iran may have overplayed its hand. I mean, what they did with Hamas, supporting Hamas, and Hamas doing what they did. The president kind of said this right afterwards that part of this was to scuttle the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and it definitely has put it on ice. There's nothing being done now because of what's happening in the Gaza, but I can guarantee that in the highest levels in the UAE, in Bahrain, certainly in Saudi Arabia and other capitals, they're really frustrated and angry with what the seeds that Iran has sown, and and I think Iran has certainly figured that out, that they may have started something that could come back on them many times over. So I don't think we're any closer to a war with Iran. I can't read the minds of Khomeini and the other theocrats there. They do things that certainly we have to be careful about mirror imaging, thinking that they think like us, because they don't think like us. They have a very different set of criteria and values on how they perceive the world. But with that said, I think this really made an impression in Tehran as to what the weight of the United States and its allies can be when we want to eliminate a threat.
Hal, right now we're taking a live look at the Gaza skyline. So I'm glad that you kind of mentioned the Israel Hamas war, because this was pretty much the catalyst, or why the Houthis say that they have even entered the arena in the first place, is because of what's going on there. I'd like to get your 2 cents on this tweet that I'm going to put up here from Representative Hank Johnson. He is from Georgia. He says here, I have what some may consider a dumb idea, but here it is. Stop the bombing in Gaza, then the attacks on commercial shipping will end. Why not try that approach? Your answer to that, Hal.
Well, I don't know if it's a dumb idea, but it's an idea that's not real in this world. Let's just put it that way. There's no, if there was a ceasefire in Gaza, all right, would the attack stop? Maybe for a while. Okay. The problem is that Israel cannot let Hamas continue to control Gaza, cannot let Hamas continue to launch October 7th type attacks or other attacks from Gaza. So stopping what's going on in Gaza right now, whereas it sounds like a straightforward idea, and certainly he's not the only person out there, or the only, and his office isn't the only office out there that is presenting the idea of an immediate ceasefire. That's being heard in corners all around the world, but it doesn't solve the longer term problem. And the problem is getting rid of Hamas, and so that's the issue. The other is that the Houthis basically have to be degraded. I can tell you one thing right off with the Houthis. All right, I don't see any Iranian ships that are going to be docking at Houthi-controlled ports and offloading arms. That is not going to happen. The array of naval combatants that we have in that area is going to dramatically curtail any maritime shipping of any type going into Houthi-controlled ports, or any ports where potential arms could be possibly offloaded and transported into Houthi-controlled territories. I just don't see it happening. So when you degrade their missiles, when you degrade their drones, there's a very limited ability of Iran to resupply them in that regard. What they have is what they have, and by the way, once they take it out of any place that we couldn't hit, and they get it ready to where they could launch it, we're right there. We have a carrier task force sitting right off the coast. We got all the missiles that are right there, and frankly, I would imagine that we're looking very closely at every square meter of Houthi controlled territory in Yemen. So if they do something, I would imagine that we would be very proactive at this point.
All right, Hal, I do have one final question with this, and what's going to happen throughout this weekend? Can we expect similar attacks like this to continue on over the next few days?
We might. Let's see. We'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll see if the Houthis launch a missile or if they can launch more than one missile or drones or whatever they have. It really will be telling. It will be telling as to how effective our strikes were. And certainly, if they do launch missiles and drones, I'm pretty sure we're going to be looking very closely to see where they come from. And as soon as we know, we're probably going to do something to make sure that we degrade that capability as well. And we'll see how this rolls out. We don't want to take any territory in Houthi controlled Yemen. We don't want to be on the ground in Houthi controlled Yemen, but we do want to degrade their ability to do what they're doing. And that's probably going to be the focus for this weekend. But again, let's see what they can manifest. What can they manifest? What can they put out there? They've said we're going to strike back harder than we ever did before. My question is, with what? What are you going to strike back with? That's what I'd like to know. And so we'll find out this weekend.
I guess we'll just have to see. And Hal, of course, you'll be on standby for all of this, the developing news. We'll keep in touch with this weekend. Hal Kempfer, national security analyst, retired Marines intelligence officer. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you, Carel.
I want to give a live look to all of our viewers right now here in this 3 box that you can see a live look out of Gaza, and then up in the right, a live look out of Tel Aviv, and then we have a live look out of northern Israel. A lot of developments when it comes to that side of the world, and especially with the escalation when it comes to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll see you back here right after this.